This is my Nonna, Edvige D'Andrea, a proud Italian-American wife, mother, grandmother, and immigrant success story. Born on November 19, 1933, Edvige went from humble beginnings in the small mountain village of Pacentro to fostering a remarkable family and having a life story that few can compare to. Her fascinating past shaped her into the infinitely knowledgeable and empathetic person that we know today. Now, I'm sitting down with her to discuss her amazing life experiences. So, tell me about your earliest childhood memories in Pacentro. What are the first few things you can think of? What comes to mind?
My earliest memory is when my father left to come to the United States, which was December 14th, 1939. And I was 6 years old. And then he left by himself, hoping he was going to Chicago. He was a tailor and worked for Marshall Field's, big department store in Chicago. And he had a job already because he had lived there previously. And then when he arrived there, he was going to find a home for us, for my mother and my 2 brothers and 2 sisters, 5 of us. He was going to find a home, and then we would come to the United States. But then, unfortunately, the Second World War broke, so all the communications were broken. We couldn't come. So he was in Chicago by himself, and my mother with 5 of us were in Pacentro, and no communication, no letters, nothing,
Really?
no money. So to this day, I don't know how my mother did it. She was a saint.
How did you all get by in Pacentro? What did your mom do?
Well, she did a lot of embroidery. So because the girls in Italy or in small villages, when they get married, they have a dowry. You know, they have like so many sheets, so many pillowcases, and my mother, and they were all monogrammed. So my mother did that for those people, but they didn't have any money to pay. But they gave us food, because most of them were farmers. They gave us flour, oil, potatoes, and that's how we survived during the war. And then after that, the war was going on, and then when Italy realized they were not going to win the war, they joined the Allies, you know. So we became enemies of Germany. And then they came, they occupied our little village, you know, and then after a while, I think it was, well, they told us that there was going to be some fighting in the village, so they wanted us out of there. So they asked us to evacuate, and they were taking everybody in these big black covered trucks to northern part of Italy. But my uncle, see, we lived in a big house. My father's brother and his wife and us, my mother and her sister married 2 brothers. So we lived in this big house, but it was divided, you know. We had half, and and he said, no, we're not going there. I'm going to find a place on our own. So he went to a city nearby called Sulmona, and he had a lot of friends there. And so he knew this family who had a big house, and in the winter they went to Rome to live because it was warmer there. So they told my uncle, you can move there with the whole family. So it was our family with 5, and he had 7 children. And then we also had neighbors who lived across the street. They had 2 boys, or no, 1 boy, and she was expecting a baby. So we arrived there. We were very comfortable. My uncle was a benefactor of the friars. Was a convent of friars, and they brought us food, so we were fine. But then somebody reported us to the Germans that we were evacuees, so we had to leave again.
Oh my.
And by the way, we walked. I was 9 years old. 9 kilometers from Pacentro to Sulmona.
You walked?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And we all had to carry something. So, and while we were walking there along the mountain, all of a sudden I didn't see anybody in front of me, and nobody behind. I was so scared. I thought I was lost, you know. Anyway, so then my uncle went to this little, it was like a fraction of a village, and he found a stable. And that's where we lived. They bought some straw, and they put one side for all the males, and we were sleeping on the floor. And we lived there for a while, and the food was scarce. My uncle wanted to buy some little potatoes that they gave to pigs, but they wouldn't give them to us. So, some days it was so cold because the firewood was wet and it didn't burn, you know. So we stayed in bed, and because it was so cold. And then that lasted until January of the following year, and we were able to come back to the house. But when we came back to the house, there was nothing left. They had taken everything, the beds, and all the winter. You know, this house was a big house, but they had no refrigeration, you know, no heating. But we had one room which was called fondaco. It was a cold room, and you could keep winter supplies there. So my mother bought fruit. She bought grapes and then hung them up and became raisins, you know, and she bought flowers, potatoes. But that was all gone. And the beds were gone, so we had to make mattresses out of corn husks.
Oh, wow.
Filled. That's where we slept. But eventually, things got better. I know Robert, the oldest one, he was 7 years older than me. He went to help the Germans unload food, and they would give him a loaf of bread.
Wow.
And then the headquarters were across the street from us. It was a big, big house, and some of those people were like the cook. He would cook and then give us some bones with some meat left. That's how we survived. I mean, we had one little bowl of soup, and we were lucky. And you know, I used to be so picky before the war. I don't know how my mother put up with me, but then I ate whatever they gave me, you know. So then after, well, when the war was over, then the Germans, before they left the village, they dynamited the electric powerhouse.
Wow.
So we had no electricity for 9 months. So we all went to, the bedrooms were upstairs, and we all went to bed at the same time with a candle. Then when they finally left, in the meantime, while they were there, they would have what they call rastrillamento. They used to gather all the men and take them. And one time they took Uncle Robert. He was like 14, 15. And they said that he would be coming back, you know. We thought he was coming back, but he was gone 14 days. and my mother didn't sleep. They went up the mountains and they were sleeping on the snow. They had to bring food to the soldiers up there, the Germans. So, I mean, there's a lot more, but this is the highlight. Then, when the Germans left, and we finally got a letter from my father.
Oh, wow.
He sent a letter. There was a Monsignor from Pacentro who lived in Rome, in the Vatican, and my father sent him a letter with money to give to us. So we got that, but then we didn't hear anymore, and we didn't know what happened. We found out that he had a stroke, so he had to be in the hospital. And in those days, they didn't have insurance, health insurance. Mm-hmm. So he spent all his savings, and luckily, he was in the U.S. Navy. He served in the U.S. Navy, so he qualified for Veterans Hospital. So he came to Pennsylvania, which is where my grandmother lived, and he was in Butler, Pennsylvania, for a while. And so then we came in 1949. My mother, first Attilio came, my younger brother, by himself, and then Robert the following year. Then we came in 1949. My mother, my sister Candida, and my sister Vittoria and I. And we went to live with my grandmother. But just before we arrived, they moved my dad. They were moving all the stroke patients to upstate New York, in Canandaigua. So after we came, I only saw my dad once because we didn't have a car. It was too far. And Uncle Vince took us. And of course, it was, I don't know, it was a big shock for us because he was a picture of health when he left. But then the stroke had affected his whole left side and his mind. So he was walking with a cane and his mind, because, my sister Vittoria had polio when she was 22 months old. And the first thing he said, "How's Vittoria?" And she was right there, So his mind didn't work very well. So my mother and my two sisters and I saw him that one time, but my brothers would go there on a weekend to visit. They took a train, they slept on the train, they saw him, came back and went to work Monday. So my brothers, they were studying in Italy, but they were just sitting there. They were doing nothing. And I had my mother's brother, who was a builder. He was building homes. So Robert said, "Uncle Vince, why don't you take us with you and see what you're doing, instead of sitting at home." So they went and they started working for my uncle. They didn't know anything about building a house, but they learned, both of them, And Robert did well. He started building on his own. But I remember he wrote a letter. He said, I switched from the pen to the hammer. And he said, because in Italy, the homes, those old homes, the walls are thick like this. But here it's all, wood. And so he said, when you walk, the house shakes. Those are little things I remember. And then they began to work, and they were the only two working, Robert and Attilio. My mother stayed home. She didn't know English, and they didn't either, but they went to evening schools, and they learned English.
And how did you learn English?
Well, then Candida, my older sister, Vittoria, younger sister, and I went to school. We didn't know a word of English, so we started in the elementary level because we had to learn the language, So But when you're young, you learn fast. So in 6 months, we start learning, and we went, like, we stayed. You had to literally or technically be in each grade. So we went maybe a week, and then we moved up. So we caught up with the rest of the. But one thing that I never forget is that during recess, the children, you go out
Yeah.
for recreation. Well, some of them didn't want to go. They wanted to stay in the class and teach us English, which I thought was very nice. So we learned, and we did well. Then I graduated, and when I graduated, I didn't have any skills, but I had to work, to help the family. So I didn't know what to do. So I went to see the girls' counselor, Miss Anita Sanvito, and I said, Miss Sanvito, I have to work, but I don't have any skills. What can I do? So she said, well, there's a business school in Pittsburgh called Robert Morris. They have a work-study program that you can work and study. So I began to work for the school, 7 hours, and the other day I went to class. And I earned enough to pay for the tuition and the commuting.
Oh, wow.
Because I was commuting, and but you had to graduate in the upper fifth of your class to qualify.
Tell them what he's in school.
So I graduated second.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So I qualified, and I worked for the school. And then the next day I went to class. I learned shorthand. I learned how to type. And when I finished, the lady I worked for, the boss there in the office, said, there's a small bank in Pittsburgh. They have a secretary there. She's leaving because she's having a baby, and maybe you could go there for an interview. So I went. I was so nervous. You had to wear a suit, and I didn't even go to lunch. I was so nervous. So I went there for an interview. I had to take a shorthand letter, and they asked me a lot of questions, and then I got the job.
Wow.
I
Nice.
started working there. I was the youngest one, and they treated me like a princess. Everybody was so nice to me, and I worked there for 5 years. And in the meantime, they offered classes on banking, and if you got an A or a B, they would pay your tuition. So I started taking classes in the evening. And in parentheses, this was in the evening, and I think Nonna was interested to get together. So he would meet me when I got off the bus. I had to take a bus. I don't even remember where the school was, and then another one to go home to McKees Rocks. Well, he waited for me, and we got on the bus together and go home to McKees Rocks. And then one time he asked me if I would type something for him, and I didn't want to say no. So I did, and then I couldn't study for my test. I didn't get an A, I got a B. Oh, gee.
How did you all initially meet?
Well, he was a good friend of Robert
Okay.
and Attilio. As a matter of fact, Robert treated him like a brother. And one time, he wanted to go out on a date with somebody else, and Robert let him use his car. So anyway, so I was able to finish that, and then I worked for the bank for 5 years, and then we start dating with Nonna, and then he went to work in Wyoming, so we were we had long distance dating. We wrote to each other every day, and we still have the letters. and then we got married in June. I think I started. I don't remember. Anyway, he came home for Christmas. He spent more time on the plane than the days he had off. So after Christmas, the day after Christmas, he, his brother and Gloria came to visit me. They said they were going to take me to lunch. So they came in, I introduced them to my boss, and my boss said, well, you can have the afternoon off. Okay, so they said, okay, Gloria and I have to exchange some Christmas presents. And they sent Joe and me somewhere else, you know. So they went to buy the ring.
Oh.
So they came back, and then we had a little. They all came to my house, and his parents sent me a nice bouquet of flowers, and he hadn't even asked me if I wanted to marry him, but he bought the ring. Oh God! The following year, we got married, June 27th, 1959. And I was supposed to go to Wyoming, but then Nonna decided to come back east, and I was so happy. And then Nonna got a job with the Federal Park Commission in Washington, and then we moved to Virginia in 1959.
And
So-
where did you first move in Virginia?
Where?
Yeah.
In Arlington. We had a one-bedroom apartment. And so I'm sitting there, didn't know anybody. So I said, I'm going to go look in the paper, see if I can find a job. So I did. I took a bus. I went to this, what was called Melpar. It was an engineering company that did mostly government contracts. So I had to get the clearance.
Wow.
Not the top, but anyway. So I worked for there were 12 engineers and a project manager. You know, so it was my little old me there. All these people. I'd never been away from home, so that was a good thing for me. And then right next to me there was somebody. The last name was Marchionna. I said, gee, it's a nice Italian name. So I asked him, I said, well, are there any Italians in this area? Oh, he said, in Washington, yeah. And here, I'll give you my mother's phone numbers. You can talk to her. And she was from Italy. And she was like my surrogate mother.
Oh, wow.
Since then, you know. And because in those days, phoning long distance was very expensive, and we didn't have much money, you know. So I used to call her, and then she says, "Why don't you come over?" They lived near American University in Washington. Mr. Marchiona was a chemical engineer, bright man, and so we went there for coffee, and so we had a nice chat, and then it was Thanksgiving. We were not planning to go home, so they invited us, and we were friends forever. So that when our first child was born, Candida, she came to the hospital with the daughter Celeste, and they brought me a beautiful bouquet of flowers. And then because my mother wanted to come, but I said, you come when I come home from the hospital. That's when I need help. So when my mother came, Mrs. Marchiona used to brag, I saw your granddaughter before you did. And then we decided that I would stay home to raise the children.
Okay.
I wanted to raise the children myself.
Yeah.
But in those days, not too many women worked when they were raising a family, which I think is the best way. But now life is so much harder that you need two salaries to survive. But I enjoyed my children very much. I wouldn't change it. So,
I just want to know, when you had your first child, you're sitting in the hospital bed, you're holding Candida.
yeah,
What's going through your mind?
I'm loving her. It's such a beautiful experience. We came home, and then my mother came the day I came home, and she was so good. She did everything. All I did was take care of the baby. She did the cooking, she did the washing, and she came for each one of them. And she was my mother. I call her a saint. She didn't discriminate. She loved everybody.
What are some of your favorite memories from raising your kids?
Oh, like when they would say, "Mommy, I love you," we used to, because we was a big family. I used to make a schedule.
Oh.
Each one had a job, and I posted it. And then all of a sudden things didn't go well, so we had to revise it. And we would have these plenary meetings.
Very nice.
Dad would preside, Nonna would preside, and everybody could say what was bothering them.
Oh.
So we tried to adjust. But then less than a week, and then we had to do it again. So it was fun. We did so much, even like when
Belafonte.
huh?
Talk about Eric Belafonte.
Oh yeah, we had a 1-bedroom apartment. Then we moved to a 2-bedroom apartment, and then to a 3-bedroom house, and then the final one was the one in Fairfax.
Yeah.
But the one in Springfield was what they called a bi-level, and when you entered, there was a family room in the first level. Then upstairs, the living quarters.
Yeah.
So when Nonna came home from work, we would have dinner, and then we'd go downstairs and put music on, Harry Belafonte, Herb Halpert, and we would dance. But also, they used to have a lot of free music concerts in Washington.
Really?
Almost every night we would go there, because it wasn't very far. But then when we moved to Fairfax, it was a little farther, and things changed, when we had 2 in college, first when Paul started school, then I started doing some volunteer work. I worked for the training center, which was a facility for handicapped people. I worked there for a while as a volunteer. I volunteered at the school. And then when we had 2 in college, I said, I better get a job and help out. So my neighbor who worked for the school system, she said, you should apply for the health department. They have clinic aides, and you only have to work when the children are in school.
Oh.
So I applied, and I worked in the clinic, And when the kids didn't have school, then I could stay home. I didn't make much money, but it helped a little bit, And the children didn't suffer because I was home when they were home.
Nice.
And that's the way I operated. But I mean, we didn't. we didn't go out to dinner often, only maybe for special occasions, because we opted that I would stay home.
Yeah, well, but the Mother's Day treat.
Huh?
Remember the Mother's Day treat? We wanted to-
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Then on Mother's Day, the children wanted to serve breakfast in bed, and I really didn't like it, but I pretended like it. I prefer to eat at the table.
No, one went to the restaurant.
What?
That famous restaurant.
Oh, one time, Nonna was traveling, and I think we only had 3 then. He was traveling, and he said, "Oh, I want to take you to a nice place for dinner." So we went to what was called the Lazy Susan Inn. Nice restaurant. We had a nice table with a fireplace, and the kids ordered, you know. They didn't eat a thing. So we said, from now on, it's McDonald's.
Yeah.
And then, of course, after, in 1986, Nonna got posted at the UN in Geneva, and so he left in May. At the time, we had Lisa, Laura, and Paul left at home. So I had to wait until they finished that school year, and then we were going to go. So I was busy. We were renting the house, which was a big mistake. And so I had to get the house ready for renting. And then we left, I think we went in August with Laura, Lisa, Laura, and Paul. And Paul started to go to the international school in Switzerland, and Lisa and Laura just went to French and took French the whole year.
Oh, okay.
So then they came. They didn't want to study in university there, so they came back to the States for the university. And Paul had 2 years of the international school, and Nonna signed me up to take French. They offered French for the spouses, so I had to take French at 56 years old. I thought, oh well, you know, I know Italian, it should be a breeze. Wrong. At 56, you're not absorbed. But I did well. I learned enough to go to the grocery store, answer the phone, carry a conversation, and but at the end of the class, we had to take a test in the big, where they have all the big meetings in Geneva, in the
Really?
and only with earphones. I didn't sleep the whole night,
Oh.
but I did well, and then, let's see, Lisa and Laura came back to the States, and Paul finished, he graduated from the international school. He did well. He was president of his class, and he had to make a speech for graduation. and he didn't write anything down. Nonna and I were so nervous. Paul, what are you going to say? Mom, don't worry. Don't. And but he was so good. He just had it in his head. And the main speaker was the ambassador of Sweden.
Oh my goodness.
He was so boring. But Paul was good. Too bad we didn't think of taping it, you know. But anyway, then after Paul graduated, he and his friends got a Eurorail and they traveled, and they went to the Berlin Wall before it fell. You know? Yeah, so he had a great time. And then in 1986 we came back to Fairfax, and that Nonna continued to do some consulting because at the UN you have to retire. It was compulsory, no, to retire at 60. But 60 is young.
Yeah.
So he was offered a job by a French company to do some consulting. But he also could have worked in Paris for a non-government organization. But we decided that we were missing the family too much, so we came back. And he continued to do consulting, and I stayed home and played. I also played when I was in Geneva there. I joined, they had the American Women's Club. I said, well, it's probably a good idea to get to know some people. And so I did, and I met this lady from Massachusetts, Peggy. She had 7 children, so we had a lot in common. So I got to know her, so instead of going back to the club, I did things with her, you know. And then the UN had a women's club too, so I went there just to socialize. But one little incident was that there was the wife of the ambassador of, I think, Pakistan. And so we were talking, and she said, I have a daughter who goes to school in Pennsylvania. Oh, what's her name? Oh, Slippery Rock. That's where Lisa was going. And Lisa knew her.
Oh, wow.
Can you imagine?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
So anyway, and then of course we stayed in that house until 2013. Then we made the big decision to move into a retirement community, which is where we are now. It was a little hard. It was harder for Nonna than me. I didn't miss the big 3-floor house because I like this. It's all one level. But now we're pretty well adjusted, and we like the people here are very interesting and very kind. So that's it. That's my life.
So this...
And of course we have beautiful children. That's my biggest accomplishment, I feel. They, you know, they're beautiful, they're caring, they're loving, and we love them. We love them, and all the grandchildren, we love them all.
So what was it like adjusting, going from place to place? Like when you went from Italy to America, then America to Europe again. What was adjusting between those places like?
Well, going to school here in the United States was very hard because, you know, I didn't know the language. But I came from this little village, which, you know, like if you went to church, you had to wear sleeves below your elbow. You almost felt like you were living a monastic life, you know. And then I come to school, and they have gym, and you have to wear shorts. So I was really, you know, I had a hard time with that. And I didn't understand slang at all because I learned English in school. And see, Nonna went out with, the boys are different.
Yeah.
Girls, the mother is much more protective, you know. And I think extra with my mother because she was the mother and the father. So she had double responsibility. So she was very protective. And, but we survived. You know, we finally, and then another thing too, my 2 brothers, they were very handsome. And all these girls, when we came, were coming to visit us. Oh, we said, gee, these people are really nice here. But they were coming for them, not for us. Oh my, I think that's it.
What are some lessons you've taken with you from place to place? Some general things you've learned throughout your experience in life?
Well, in Europe, the Swiss have a reputation of being very reserved. But I didn't have that experience. You know, they were very kind to us. But one neighbor we had, she was from Jamaica. She said, if they don't come to you, you go to them. You know. So my Nicole, when we lived in when we lived in France, we rented this big house. The owner was an architect, and he had the house, and then detached from it was his studio. Mm-hmm. And that house, in our bedroom, you've heard of Mont Blanc. It's the highest peak of the Alps, and once in a while we could see it. It was so beautiful. And then the landlady, her name was.
Tall.
Oh yeah, no, the landlady, her name was Madame Bijotin. I said, please call me Edvige. The French are very formal. They won't call you by a first name. But one time she asked me, she said, Madame D'Andrea, Monsieur D'Andrea has a ring. Does that mean nobility? It was a pit ring. I wish I were quicker to say, oh yeah, he's a duke. But anyway, so Paul was living with us at the time. And he was playing the guitar. He would go in that studio, which was detached from the house, and play and sing. And then when he was at the school, they had a talent show. And his friends were playing and singing. We didn't even know he could sing because we couldn't hear him. And then, what else? But it's, you know, my philosophy is to be kind. It doesn't cost anything to be kind to people. Mm-hmm. And if you can't say something good, don't say anything at all.
All the travel you did.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, sure.
yeah. I was able to go.
All travel here with me.
Yeah. I was able to go to Romania, to Hungary,
And when I went
Germany, Morocco. What else? Well, Nonna did a lot more traveling, but many times the spouses could come. But I remember when we went to Romania, they had things planned for the spouses, you know, while the men were working. So we had this young engineer, she was a female, and she said, oh, let's go shopping.
They all spoke English.
We went, huh?
They spoke English.
What?
They spoke English.
Oh yeah. So we went to the shop. The shops. There's nothing to buy. There was no. See, Ceausescu he said to save on electricity, so I didn't have any electricity. The light from the window was the only thing you had. So I was buying these cute little glasses. They were like 50 cents a piece. And this young woman who was an engineer, she says, I can't afford to buy this. That's how bad things were. Yeah. And then to Germany we went, and we had this young woman who was the guide. I really never liked German, but the way she was speaking it sounded much better. And then also, this was not through the UN, but we went to Egypt, which was awesome. You know, the pyramids, incredible. I mean, you know, that culture is like 5,000 years. Mm-hmm. And so I never, when Nonna, when he worked for the U.S. government, he traveled quite a bit, but I never went because I had to stay home with the children. And then I felt like when we moved to Europe, I got rewarded and I got to travel. And then we did some, also did some cruises. We went to the Caribbean once.
Went to Italy quite often.
Huh?
Went to Italy quite often.
Oh yeah. From Switzerland we went to Italy quite often. When we wanted to, because Switzerland can be very dreary. So as soon as we crossed the Mont Blanc tunnel, there's sunny Italy. And also, forgot. Anyway, we can't complain. We had a good life. Oh, we went to Russia on a cruise, and then we went to the Portugal. Of course, we also traveled. We went to Spain on our own. And I like the small villages, not the. When we went to Spain, yes, Madrid, yeah, it's a capital. You have to see it. Because the Prado's there, the museum. But I liked Avila, the small Toledo, the small places, not the big cities. Just a number there. And we had bought tickets to go to a.
Parador.
Huh?
Parador.
Oh no, I'm talking about the cows, the matador.
Oh, bullfight.
Bullfight, but they had to cancel because it rained, so we never. But in Spain, they have what they call paradors. They're castles that are converted into hotels, but they're very hard to get a reservation. But Nonna knew someone from Barcelona, and he was able to get us. And we have a souvenir, that little thing there. I think it was called Siguenza. So we stayed, and we had Paul, I think, Lisa and Laura were with us then. It was beautiful. But I remember, there are so many churches in Europe. So Paul was 16. So when we went to Italy the first time, every church we had to stop. So after a while, Paul said, "Dad, I don't want to see another church." And Nonna said, "But they're all different architectures. They all look the same to me." But I don't think he feels like that now, Anyway, we had a good life. I'm very thankful that, we worked hard, but we got rewarded with a wonderful family, grandchildren. What else can we ask for?
What would you say, what experiences would you say helped shape you as a person?
A sacrifice, hard work. I try to be frugal, because with, we were 8 of us every night, so I had to be frugal. Like I would watch the sales, and instead of buying cut up chicken, I would buy the whole chicken because it was cheaper. And also, going through the war, then that was hard. So what can be harder?
Yeah.
Like when I was working at the bank, sometimes they would give me a letter to type, and then they would change their mind. I'd have to do it again, So one of my bosses said to me, Mr. Dutton, she said, "You never get angry. You never get upset." So he said that several times. I said, "Mr. Dutton, let me tell you something. I went through the war in Italy, and this is nothing." Because we lived in constant fear. You never know what. I remember when we were in that little stable, this soldier, he had the skeleton in his lapel.
SS.
The SS. I was so scared. I thought, my father is not here. Now, if they take my mother, what am I going to do? You know. So you build up a strong character. I'm not saying that I'm strong, but I think that helped me.
Well, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
everything you had to say. It was a fantastic story. I learned a lot.
Yes. Well, thank you, Tyler, for taking the time.
All right.